Good evening, dear viewers. Hello and welcome to a new edition of Business Insider. I'm your host for tonight, Mohammed Abdel, and tonight we'll be talking about the economics of biodiversity, the economic components of biodiversity, and how can economic biodiversity help in sustainable development here in Egypt. And we are delighted to have with us in the studio Dr. Abdel Fattah Badr, and he is a professor of genetics and biodiversity at Helwan University. He is also the chairman of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. A very good evening to you, Dr. Badr. It's always a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you, Dr. Badr. Allow us, please, dear sir, dear viewers, as we always do, to watch first a report about our main topic for tonight, and then we'll come back and start our discussion with our dear distinguished guest.
The Environment Ministry has recently revealed that total revenues from Egypt's nature reserves rose by 40% in the year 2024 compared to 2023 and by over 1,900% compared to 2017-2018. During a presentation of the ministry's 2024 Achievements Report, it said that the growth reflects the success of the Ministry of Environment's efforts to enhance investments in the environmental sector, particularly within nature reserves, by providing diverse services that offer visitors a unique world-class tourism experience aligned with the reserve's natural characteristics and cultural environmental heritage. The report highlights Egypt's position as a global leader in the environmental protection and biodiversity conservation. The ministry outlined the key pillars of the nature protection sector's achievements in the year 2024, which include preserving ecosystems, developing the infrastructure of nature reserves, conserving biodiversity, supporting local communities, protecting endangered species, and enforcing environmental laws. Each pillar encompassed a variety of programs and activities that support Egypt's natural efforts for a green and sustainable transition. In the year 2021, the ministry was providing support for ecological tourism in Egypt's protected areas, as they have been one of the most important features of environmental work in the country during the previous period. In a statement, the ministry said that its natural reserves are one of the most important investment opportunities for the country.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and thank you for staying with us, and thanks to Abir Hussein and Rasha Abdelhamid for this report. You're watching Business Insider, and the topic is the economics of biodiversity, and our dear distinguished guest is Dr. Abdel Fattah Badr from Helwan University and the chairman of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. Dr. Badr, we always like to start the discussion by some definitions.
Yes.
Just to remind the viewers or those who want to know more about the relatively new term. So, biodiversity, what is biodiversity?
Biodiversity is the variation of living organisms on Earth, not only terrestrial living organisms, but also in aquatic and terrestrial organisms. And they are generally classified into aquatic and terrestrial, but in the ecosystem they are divided into ecosystem, species, or genera, or the taxonomy of the classification of these species, and of course the genes. So we have three levels: the ecosystem, the whole living organisms, plants, animals living in one place is called ecosystem. And this ecosystem can be found on land and in water, terrestrial, aquatic water, or marine water. And the other one is the classification of these species, different types of plants and animals live together, and they are classified into species, and each of these species is composed of genes. The same thing that's found in all three types of living creations is the genes, because the genes is composed of DNA, as DNA is the same in every organism. Although the organisms are different, but the gene itself is the same compound.
One creator,
yes,
subhanallah.
Yes, that's
so, so Dr. Badr, we can say that it's just about any living thing in the world. You were talking about...
Yes.
Yeah.
Living things are as I said, of course, the plants are called the producers because through the process of photosynthesis, they transform the carbon dioxide in air into carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are the food for the animals. So the plants are called producers because they produce the food, and the animals are called consumers because the animals consume the food, and they are unable to synthesize their own food. And the third components of living organisms is the microorganisms, and the microorganisms actually analyze the remaining of the plants and the animals, and these are the three major compounds of the ecosystems: the producers, the consumers, and the analysis, the microorganisms that analyze the dead material left by the animals and the plants.
Well, very nice of you to introduce us to different classifications regarding the world of biodiversity. So if we talk now about the economics of biodiversity, what can you tell us as a major headline?
The economics of biodiversity, the economic value of the biodiversity. Biodiversity, of course, is based on the production of plants and then animals. Plants and animals are the sources for food for humans. So the source of our culture and the source of our nutrition and the source of our food are produced by the components of the ecosystem of plants and the animals. And the economic value is very high because all the food, if we can't actually value our food in money, so it's very expensive. But actually the nature produces this food simply by the process of photosynthesis by plants, and the plants are transformed into meat and eggs and the other forms of food by animals. And when these actually microorganisms are also important components of the ecosystems, because many of the microorganisms produce very useful compounds like antibiotics and so on. Penicillin, for example, is produced by Penicillium notatum since 1929. We know that the Penicillium notatum produced penicillin, which is very common antibiotic. So the three forms of living organisms: the plants as producers in the ecosystem, the animals as consumers, and the microorganisms, they all contribute to the benefits of human. Of course, there is some poisonous plants, there are some poisonous microorganisms, but on the whole, they are useful. They are the benefits of these components are essential for human life, whether for food or medicine or other forms of consumption.
Indeed, food and medicine, the two major headlines there when it comes to the economic benefits of biodiversity, as you clearly highlighted, Dr. Badr. I mean, I was just going to ask you, so when we talk about economics of biodiversity, they serve food security, and they serve the world of medicine in a great way,
of course.
Much bigger than we think.
Yes, and of course the natural the nature itself is a source of what we say, if you go out to the desert, you enjoy your life in the desert. So excursions and gardens and
nature allows us to lead a healthy lifestyle.
Yes, this is also important for health. Instead of living in the cities and pollution. If you change and it will go to more pure, clean nature, then you will get more some change and some new air and new enjoyment, and you enjoy living in the desert or even on the sea and so on. In the summer, of course, we go to the Mediterranean Sea and we
so we can link the tourism sector, I guess, to the economic benefits of biodiversity.
In some other countries where they have forests, it's important we can even go to the desert and enjoy some time in the desert. It's very nice also if we live in the desert. I think we are not used to having some enjoyment in the desert like some other Arab countries, but probably we have.
Probably we should.
We should, yes.
Dr. Badr, there is a great need to conserve biodiversity. What are the dangers facing the conservation of biodiversity in our world today?
Yes, overconsumption. Of course, overconsumption is very serious threat to the biodiversity. Of course, the expansion of agricultural land or expansion of using wild areas for domestication, that has to be done. Of course, we need to produce more food by cultivating new lands like the West Delta and so on. That's important. But we should not actually get rid of the natural vegetation, natural animals living there. And we have means and ways to use the natural wealth of plants and animals without endangering them. There's many methods to conserve the natural resources and also make them useful as economic source of food or meat, for example. We can grow animals in the desert without harming the wild animals that live there. We have sufficient land to use part of it for feeding domestic animals and domestic and agricultural plants, and also keep wild plants and wild animals as well. Because actually, okay, go ahead.
No, please, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, because these are the resources for the cultivated plants and the domesticated animals. These are the wild relatives of the cultivated. So they are the resources. When we cultivate plants, we focus on the production of more food. But there is some other concept like resistance to drought, resistance to water stress. So if we should actually keep these plants for the future because we need drought-tolerant plants and drought-tolerant and animals that's adapted to drought conditions, since our environment is largely drought.
Yeah, but since you mentioned drought, and I was going to ask you anyway about climate change. How is climate change or global warming threatening the conservation of biodiversity?
It is a serious threat to biodiversity, and because some plants cannot withstand the changes by elevating the temperature and elevating carbon dioxide. But with breeding new forms of plants and probably animals as well, we can breed some strains or some species of these plants that can withstand the climate change. And actually,
that's a huge challenge. I guess it needs a lot of research.
We actually breed the plants we need it for our consumption, but the wild plants can adapt itself. Can adapt itself. Some species may may be lost, but or grow at lower numbers of plants and animals, but others will be generated because this is a normal change in the natural environment. But for the agriculture, which is important for our food, then we need to actually breed for drought tolerant and climate change tolerant forms of plants and animals.
And I guess this is where the study of genetics
genetics is very important because genetics is the ways of breeding. Thanks to Mendel, who actually put the basis of genetics, also was a mathematician, but he actually put the basis of genetics. And genetics is a modern science. It's a 20th century science, but it has made a great contribution to the improvement of food production. We actually focus on the plants that produce more food, but we also should keep the biodiversity of the plants that we don't use for our food for the time being, because in the future we need the genes restored in these plants for breeding more productive plants as well. So it's not good to cultivate all our land with crops and remove the natural plants that grows naturally, but we need to keep them. That's what we call genetic resources. They are the resources for the genetic improvement of new crops in the future. If the environment is much is hot, we breed for the plants that can withstand higher temperature and less water. Actually, most of breeding for the time being, particularly in the warm countries, is to breed plants that's drought tolerant and high temperature tolerant.
Very good. I had a sense that you were going to say, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong, when you were talking about the plants that are being overconsumed or that are getting rare because of climate change effects. And you said that there were other plants that we don't use for food. I thought you were going to tell me that at one stage, if the globe if global warming continues like this, and the wars and and we've seen what mankind has done to Earth. I mean, mankind has destroyed Earth, really. So I thought you were going to tell me that at one stage mankind might be forced to change the eating habits and even the types of food that they are consuming, because they will have to resort to these plants that are still there instead of the overconsumed plants. Is that possible?
That's
you scientists, have you thought about that?
It's partly correct in plants where they have sufficient water for plants to grow wild. Our rainfall in Egypt is not sufficient to support permanent vegetation. We see vegetation in the spring, but in the summer they disappear and they leave the seeds, and we see the plants next year. But we cannot depend on natural plants for our food. But in other countries, natural rainfall would be sufficient for the production of food. In Egypt, we need to irrigate, and we receive our water not from our own country, but we receive our water from the River Nile that comes from different countries. So we are very clever to keep our most of our food produced in our land, and we are trying to expand the land for agriculture and trying to breed plants that consume less water, so we can have more production with much less with as water as low water as we have. So Egypt is very famous for breeding for temperature tolerant plants and drought tolerant plants. But we still, because only a small part of Egypt is cultivated by the River Nile water, we need to expand the land in the west of the delta and in Sinai and in other parts of the country. And these may not be suitable for wheat and maize, because wheat and the maize consume a lot of water, but we can cultivate other plants that we may export, like medicinal plants, for example. And then
like what?
Medicinal plants.
Ah, okay.
Medicinal plants grow in Sinai and grow in the north coast. Unfortunately, the north coast now is some tourist places has been built on the north coast, but we still have some wild plants growing there, and they are most of them are medicinally important, so we can actually cultivate medicinal plants and export them medicinal compounds and import wheat and
or also produce food that depends less on water in these new potentially new cultivated areas.
Yes.
Okay.
We can actually cultivate plants that's more tolerant to high
Climate
temperature
change,
and climate change, but it does not necessarily be wheat and maize. But these plants are also important, and we can import, for example, wheat from Ukraine or Russia, where wheat is much cheaper than the wheat we produce, because we irrigate wheat. They don't actually irrigate wheat. So with the difference in the value of the plants, we export the medicinal plants where they can not grow in other countries. We export medicinal plants and import food plants.
Okay.
Sinai is very rich in medicinal plants as well, natural medicinal plants.
Dr. Badr, dear viewers, will take a break now, and we will continue the second part of Business Insider after the top stories of the hour here from our Nile TV International studios. So please stay with us, Dr. Badr, and dear viewers. We'll be back. Still have part 2 of the program. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us, dear viewers, and welcome back. You're still watching Business Insider with Dr. Abdel Fattah Badr, the Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity, the Chairman of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology. We're talking about this is part 2 of the episode, Biodiversity and the Economics of Biodiversity. Dr. Badr, is there enough awareness about the importance of conserving biodiversity here in Egypt? Is there enough awareness globally?
That's a very important question. Thank you for touching at this point, because awareness is very important to keep the resources of biodiversity, because as we said, biodiversity is a resource of food and medicine. And we need to keep this, and the awareness is very important, because many of the medicinal plants grow wild in our natural land, and if we don't have sufficient awareness for the people who visit the desert or visit the plants where the area where plants grow, and even some people may actually use these plants for treatment of some diseases, but if we can conserve them and produce the chemical compounds from the plants and export the chemical compounds, and instead of exporting the plant itself, we will increase the value, the economic value of these medicinal plants. For example, in South Sinai, which is the most rich part of Egypt with medicinal plants, some Germans, for example, go and buy plants and take plants to their factories in Germany or Switzerland. But if we actually extract the volatile compounds, that's medicinal plants, and contain and use these for manufacturing of medical compounds and export medical compounds. So the added value of the medicinal plants will be probably 10 times more than the plants itself. That's very important, and hope we will give more attention to manufacturing or extracting medicinal compounds and exporting medicinal substances rather than medicinal plants. And we also should take care of conserving these plants. Some animals may eat these plants, and that is not economically is not good for the production of the medicinal compounds in this, and probably you can find alternative food for the animals to feed the animals in this area. So medicinal and other wild plants are important sources of economy for our countries as well. Not only plants. We have microorganisms living in the plants or on the plants. We have animals growing in the plants, or birds living on the plants. So the whole ecosystem have.
We've talked a lot about the terrestrial. See, I'm learning from your classifications now. The terrestrial part. What about the aquatic part and the benefits, also the economic benefits?
Yes, the terrestrial, of course, living on Earth, but in the aquatic water, in Sharm el-Sheikh, for example, in the Mediterranean Sea, we have the Red Sea and we have the Mediterranean Sea. And there are some important mangroves, for example, is a very important habitat in the Red Sea coast, because it's not only just the plants that grow there and we enjoy seeing a mangrove, but mangrove is a habitat for many living other creations living there who may produce substances that's important for consumption by plants and animals. So mangrove is very important source, of course, of carbon dioxide. You know, climate change. Mangroves are very efficient in capturing the carbon dioxide, so the carbon dioxide will not increase the climate change, because climate change actually caused by an increase in the carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide is taken by mangroves, then the climate change will not, the temperature will not be hot. So some habitats, some ecosystems are very important, not only as a source of consumable compounds, but also for reducing climate change, like the Red Sea and so on. Also in other parts of in the desert, we need to conserve the wild plants and manage or regulate which part of the land we cultivate crops and which part to conserve for the economy of the plants grown there, like medicinal plants, for example, or grazing. Some parts are important for grazing. We may actually encourage more grazing plants to grow there, and then we will have more meat from the animals grazing these plants.
Dr. Badr, yes. Habitat loss, how do we practically, prevent it or diminish it, decrease it, not necessarily totally eradicate?
Because habitat means that the whole three forms of life forms living there, plants, animals, and microorganisms. So we should keep the balance between these three components, and not to encourage consumption of parts of component of this habitat at the expense of the others. So that will cause habitat loss, because habitat loss means it's conservation of the habitat without loss of any of its components, and this for the longer term causes stability of the environment,
the balance you talked about,
balance between the components of this. So we need to keep the habitat, because habitat has evolved for many, probably thousands of years, and the changing these habitats is very can be very fast. So we should not actually
mess with this.
We should not just experiment with an ecosystem that has been stable for many years. Changing a stable environment is not encouraged because we don't know what would happen if these ecosystems is damaged. So we need to keep the existing ecosystem and regulate their use and try to increase the production or the value of the components of these ecosystems as well.
Dr. Badr, sustainable agriculture, aquaculture and forestry. What is aquaculture?
Aquaculture means culture in water.
Okay.
So we can
cultivation
in water.
Okay.
So we can cultivate some animals, that grow in water for consumption for humans. So we can cultivate the land on earth, and we can actually cultivate fish and other forms of animal food in water as well.
So as we draw near to the end, how best to manage and have a sustainable management process of agriculture, aquaculture and forestry for the sake of food security, for the sake of the medical or health security, if I may say, and for the sake of sustainable development at large.
There is regulations by the Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Environment, Minister of Health to regulate the use. Of course, we are allowed to use some of our resources in the wild, in the agriculture, but we should not actually overuse our resources. We need to regulate so our consumption is always less than the loss of our wild resources or cultivated resources and so on. That's the meaning of.
And I guess we will have also natural reserves.
Of course, we have 30 areas which are
considered protectorates. Do we need more? I mean,
I think 30 is quite enough. At the world level, we have sufficient parts of conserved, but of course we need to actually keep them conserved to stop any mismanagement or consumption of the conserved parts of this. And for example, Sharm el-Sheikh was the first conserved area in this, and Halab and Shalatin is the second one. These are important to keep them as they are, because they produce medicinal plants and so on. They are not suitable for cultivating crop plants because the water there is not sufficient. So we should not disturb the system that produces medicinal plants and expect to cultivate others. We may cultivate there, but in other system, and not in the natural system.
Okay. That's unfortunately the time is up, dear viewers. On behalf of you, we thank very much our dear distinguished guest, Professor of Genetics and Biodiversity at Helwan University, Dr. Abdel Fattah. Badr, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's always nice talking with you.
It's always nice to have you, Dr. Abdel Fattah. And thank you, dear viewers, for watching us. Please stay with 9 TV International.